wanted to go over was the battery, to make sure that the starter wasn't failing or I had improper connections anywhere. So I started by checking the battery, and AutoZone said it was bad. It was from 2016, and honestly, I just wanted to get rid of it. So I replaced the battery, replaced the connections, and I checked the voltage over each of the terminals to rule out that any one of the battery connections could have a significant improper connection. In my case, there wasn't. I also went around and checked the connections between the grounds. The one ground that's on the oil dipstick, there's 3 grounds on the block near the alternator. I checked one of the grounds between battery negative and the firewall, and then I checked the 4 by the ECU, and just went around and checked connections to make sure there wasn't any improper connections anywhere that could be leading to some sensor believing something it doesn't, or just being otherwise confused. I did, even though they were ruled out, I did decide to take off the grounds and clean them all individually, and noticed no change whatsoever in the performance. So, chasing some leads and really not making some good guesses, I decided to replace the crankshaft sensor, replaced the throttle position sensor. I also replaced the battery. Mine was really tired and I knew it wasn't really working too well, so I just wanted to be done with it. Replaced the battery with a good one, got some good connections on it, replaced that, cleaned up all the connections, and it wasn't the battery. It cranks a lot faster, has a lot better cold cranking amps, but still wasn't the battery. I also, like I said, went through all the grounds, the 3 on the block by the alternator, then I went on the 1 on the block by the oil dipstick fill, the 1 on the firewall that also connects to the engine block, the 4 by the ECU, and just checked all of the harness connections on the intake, and they all looked good, such as the map sensor, the the IC, and again the throttle position sensor. For another check, I checked the cam sensor by taking off the cap with 2 7/32 6-point hex, and found the magnet was still in place. When the Jeep first had a weak cold start, I checked my fuel pressure, and at the time I checked it, and I found that I'd turn the ignition and primer it up to about 45 or 50 psi, and it'd hold there. It seemed to be on a trend for just staying there and being just fine, so at the time I ruled out fuel pressure, which is why I focused on electrical problems. This time I checked again just to rule it out, since I knew it wasn't sensors now, and noticed that it was immediately losing fuel pressure. That's definitely the cause of the problem, so that left a few possible places. Either the fuel pump check valve is bad, or the injectors are leaking, or there's some leak in between. The engine runs fine, I still got 20 miles per gallon on a recent trip, so I didn't believe it to be the injectors leaking. Really leading it to be the fuel pump pressure regulator slash check valve. In my case, mine was only 2 years old. It was a Delphi unit, so I'm really frustrated about that, but that's ultimately how I determined what the problem was. And it is a check valve. I found that priming the ignition rapidly, like 1, 2, 3, 4, priming it like that, and it starts out just fine. I've been limping it no problem ever since. I'm just waiting for the fuel tank to empty, and I will be replacing the pressure check valve.